Boa noite, pessoal. Sejam todos bem-vindos à nossa live da Litecc Internacional, a primeira de muitas. Falo aqui em nome da Liga de Terapias Cognitivo-Comportamentais da UFMG, juntamente com a Ana Carolina e o Pedro. Estamos muito felizes por receber a Kimberly e o Pedro vai passar mais algumas informações para que a gente tenha uma ótima palestra hoje. Obrigada pela presença de todos.
Então, gente, a nossa palestrante de hoje é a doutora Kimberly Kay, né? Kimberly Vay. Ela é presidente da... Ô, Ana, me ajuda aí. Da certificação de DBT, gente. É tipo assim, você ter uma certificação de DBT, ela é a organização disso e é a presidente disso. Então, tipo assim, é a mais qualificada que a gente tem sobre o assunto. Ela fez uma apresentação baseada no nosso contexto cultural. Ela está muito preocupada nisso, está muito interessante. Algumas considerações importantes. O certificado vai ser disponibilizado através do link do e-mail que vocês receberam através do Simpla. E no final da apresentação vai ter perguntas que vocês podem mandar pelos comentários aí e a gente repassa para ela, tá bom? E uma coisa importante também é que a palestra vai ser em inglês. A gente não conseguiu fazer a tradução simultânea, e depois da gravação a gente vai legendar tudo em português para vocês, para quem não, para quem, né, quiser ver em português e achar melhor, depois vai estar disponível em português. E de questão de formação é basicamente isso, né?
Olá, pessoal. Então,
Bom,
vou começar aqui a nossa apresentação e vou mudar para o inglês, tá bom? So, hello everyone. Good evening and welcome. My name is Ana Carolina and I'm speaking on behalf of Litecc, the Cognitive Behavior Therapy Study Group here at UFMG Brasil. We are truly honored and excited to welcome you all to today's special talk with Dr. Kimberly Vay, President of the DBT Lahan Board of Certification and a certified DBT clinician. Dr. Vay is joining us from live from Atlanta, Georgia, and will be sharing her professional journey, her international experience with DBT, and some practical insights of how this approach can be applied in different clinical settings, including here in Brazil. This event is being streamed live on YouTube and will remain available later with automated Portuguese subtitles. So feel free to revisit and share, and please, if you have any questions, just please send us here that we are going to share them on the screen. We want to thank again Dr. Kimberly Vay for generously accepting our invitation. It means a lot to us and to everyone watching. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Kimberly Vay.
I really appreciate the invitation and the willingness to learn internationally. I was saying before I started that this is globally, we need to do more of this to understand and burst the bubbles that we live in and see that there's a bigger universe. And I know when Marsha Linehan, one of her pieces with DBT is that we're all connected, right? Like everybody's interconnected. And so I think that, and as I will talk about in my journey, is that we all can learn. We never stop learning from each other. And so I think culturally is a huge piece of that learning so I really appreciate, and it's really admirable of even sending out the invite. So I'm honored to be here. So okay. Well, thank you. You shared it for me. So I'm going to shift a little bit about what we talked about, and feel free to send your questions. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end that you may have. So again, I am Kimberly Vay, and I am here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I sort of fell into DBT. Let me go back. I'll give you a background first. I sort of fell into DBT after I left education. So here in the US, we have a licensing process. And so we go to undergrad, and then you go get a graduate degree in social work or counseling. And then you have to go through a licensing process. And so that is licensed and supervised by a certified supervisor. And so at the time I was in education, I taught in an alternative school, and that was my teaching in the alternative school with those kids that the public schools and the other schools felt like weren't teachable, or they didn't want to teach, was like the passion that I had. And so when I decided to get licensed, I went into a residential facility. So I taught in a residential facility, or I was a therapist in a residential facility, and their main modality was DBT. And so that's how I sort of fell into it, and recognizing the power of DBT and the power of behaviorism, which I know, speaking to y'all earlier, that is not what your university is like focused on in the behaviorism piece. And that piece was just life-changing for clients, and like, in my opinion, game changer for the therapist, because it was more of that practical approach of what you could do when life got really hard and when those behaviors showed up. And so that just, I got hooked into it at that point, because I just saw how powerful it was to give agency back to the clients that felt like they've lost all their agency, especially in a residential setting where they have no, right, they're like in a locked facility. And so that really just started my journey. And then I've always been I will learn from anybody, and I want to continue learning. And so I try to stay as connected. And I am the type of person that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I actually want to be the less experienced person in the room, because that, like, I grow in that way. And so that has sort of shaped my journey of even getting to presidency, of being like that humility and being fallible and being open to not knowing what I'm doing and learning from somebody else. And so I want to say first, because there's going to be a few slides in here, that I'm the president of the DBT Lahan Board of Certification. I'm not affiliated with behavioral tech. And so I have some information in here about behavioral tech. They have done some work in Brazil and currently doing work in Brazil, but I just want to put out the disclaimer that I'm not affiliated with behavioral tech. So DBT LBC is a nonprofit organization where we are, and it was developed by Marsha Linehan, the developer of DBT. And we certify clinicians and programs that to assess clinicians and programs for the delivery of the treatment. So when I went through certification, I had to take an exam on the material. I had to submit, at the time, I had to do a case conceptualization, then I had to submit recordings of an actual session that got coded for adherence. And you'll learn later of the importance of adherence. But that process alone allowed me to really take a broader view of the treatment. And I did not pass my case conceptualization on the first time, and you would have thought my career was over. But it was humbling and very like, I can remember where I was, what I was doing when I got the email that I didn't pass it. But that is just a part of the process. And I think that's a part of DBT. And I think that's an important piece of working with clients, is not being the smartest one in the room. The clients are the experts in their lives, right? We have the book knowledge. We have the practical knowledge. They're the experts in their lives. And so that bringing that humility that I found in that, after I got over the fact that my career wasn't over because I didn't pass that the first time, that I'm not, I want to show up as a fallible, that I make mistakes and I want to learn from you just like you're learning from me. And so I think sitting with clients, it's really important that you recognize that we have the knowledge on the book end of it, and they have the knowledge in their life. And so being able to keep that at the forefront has been helpful in everything I've done through my journey. And just quickly, the Linehan Board of Certification is a certification. We have we independently assess, whereas there are some certificates that you get that are just an attestation or just saying that you completed a training. And so the certification is more of a rigorous process to ensure that we have that I can demonstrate that I can deliver the treatment with a real live client that gets assessed. So it talked a little bit about this, but I would say, you know, when I was thinking about doing this, I was thinking and I don't particularly like this question, but like, what would I tell my younger self? And I put that in, like, what would I tell somebody who is going through the process that hasn't been through the process yet? And what information, like what wisdom can I bring to their experience that might shape or might have you look at going into the clinical field in a different light? And I think the first part is, you know, finding those mentors and being willing and able to and open to being fallible and being like showing up and saying, I think I messed up. I don't think I did that right. Or I think that this, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. And being able, and even saying that at times to clients, right? Like, I don't know what is, I don't know. We have to figure this out together. Like, you're the expert in your life. And so help me help you. And not being the, you know, in DBT, it's a lot different than some other modalities in terms of the relationship is so important that it's an equal, like we're both moving in the same direction. And I shouldn't work harder than you, nor should you work harder than me. Right. And so there's not a power differential. By nature, there is, right? Because I'm the professional and you're the client. But in terms of our interaction, there's not a power differential. If I've invalidated you, tell me, because I need to know, right? Like, and so giving them a voice and having mentors and having supervisors and individuals that can give you that feedback, and that you can be open to giving that feedback too. And there's no judgment around it. Like, how dare you say that, right? Like that, you know, you want somebody that's saying like, let's think about why you said that versus how could you ever say that to a client, or how could you ever say that, right? Like, because that learning process never ends, right? Like, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I want to put myself in spaces where I have something like that I can learn from, and that there's a mutual learning, and that goes for sitting with clients also. So my initial mentors and current mentors are a huge piece of how I've gotten to where I'm at, but also the growth moving forward, because I'm a true believer that, you know, there is no final destination, right? Like, this is an ever evolving process that is you're constantly learning. And that was in my early practice experiences of working in residential. Those individuals didn't have a voice a lot of times, right? They were locked in a facility and they had all their power taken away. So being able to use DBT that comes from a validating place to say, like, you do matter. You can tell me that, you know, whatever I'm doing is hurtful or that you don't like. And so that really hooked me into DBT, because I saw how it lessened the burden on the client to show up in this perfect way, or to show up in this way that they're supposed to show up, or the way that society has told them to show up. That you can show up as you, and we can figure out what is not working, as opposed to how do you show up as society wants you to show up. And I think that there's a lot of pieces that the culture plays a part in, and there are a lot of pieces that there's a lot of human pieces to it too. So my career milestones that has gotten me to the place that I'm at is, I always was seeking out, I was always seeking out learning and growing in different areas and never thinking that I got it. Like I can feel confident in my delivery, but there's always something else that I can grow from. And so doing engaging in trainings, which is why I think it's so admirable of what you all are doing and reaching out and putting in the effort to actually like go outside of probably even your comfort zone in a sense of hosting something that it goes beyond, the norm, and that there's growth in that, and, and sort of take what you want and leave the rest. But like being able to be open to that training and those lecture series and all of those. And so I've always been one to like sign me up, right? Like, so if there's ever a training, like sign me up, even if it's something that I know that I'm pretty confident in, I can learn something. Somebody has something different that I can learn from, and looking at it through that lens, as opposed to looking at it as I know this already. So that I think has been a huge key. It's been a pillar in moving me forward, because that never changes. And then I did some program development where it had me think outside the box, because DBT is an outpatient treatment that it is principle driven, right? It's not protocol necessarily, but it's principle driven. And so in a residential, how do I keep the fundamental pieces of DBT while fitting within the context of a residential setting? Really stretched. It was a mental exercise of how do we actually get this treatment to fit the confines of the setting. And so that really helped me look at the treatment from a different angle and look at all that it has to offer, and that it's not a one size fits all necessarily. So that was a huge piece in just sort of that mental exercise and stimulating my mind in a different way than the textbook way. And through all of that, I stayed connected. And once I got certified, I was like, sign me up is sort of what my motto was. And so I just got connected with the leaders in the field, with those early developer experts, the development experts, and wanted to learn from them. And so that piece has helped me not get stagnant and not get complacent in, I'm good, like I know what I'm doing. It's like there's a dialectic of like, I know what I'm doing, and there is a lot more out there that I need to learn. And so connecting with all of the early the treatment developers and the experts to help just foster a community, right? Because DBT really is a community. And I look at my national, international DBT community from DBT LBC and beyond. Those are my people, right? Like that's who I show up for and I show up with, and that we all show up with the same mission to provide this treatment that actually saves lives and gives people their life back. And so being able to show up in a space with like-minded individuals, that nobody is judging anybody's experience level, and like learning from each other. And so that piece of it has been a huge piece to just keeping me on my toes and keeping me humble, in a sense of that I still have a lot to learn. So lessons along the way. So some of the things that I have taken that if I was in undergrad now, that I would want somebody to tell me, is to keep your values at the forefront. Lead with purpose, right? Like, so I always look at, what is the purpose? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm not doing this for accolades, or I'm not doing this for praise. I'm doing this because of a value that I want information out there. I was gifted with really wonderful supervisors and wonderful mentors, and I want to be able to give back. And so when I even accept an invitation like this, I have to ask myself, like, why why am I accepting this? Because it's part of my values and there's a purpose behind it, right? And so looking at how are you sort of navigating through life with the values and purpose? And I think that helps make decisions that align with those values and that feel like you are, that when things get really rough, you can go back to the value, like why you're doing the things that you're doing. Keeping adherence at the forefront. When we talk about adherence, we're talking about the delivery of the treatment and what makes the treatment work and the research behind it, and making that at the forefront of the delivery of the treatment, because when there's drift within the adherence, the treatment then isn't going to show up the same way, and it isn't going to, the clients that are seeking out the treatment are seeking it out because they need it. And so they are trusting us that we're going to deliver what we know in an adherent manner so that they have the best chance of actually getting what they're looking for, and it not being, pieces of it, or that they're actually being provided with what the research supports, right? In DBT, LBC, everything, all of our standards that we have set have been based off of research. So nothing is arbitrary, and nothing is like, oh, I think that could work, or, this has worked for me type thing, right? It's really been evidence-based and backed up by the research, which is what makes DBT so effective, is because of the evidence of the research behind it, and the work that was put in to sort of test that evidence. Connection is key. And so I would encourage, I love that you guys have this student group, that being connected and finding that community that you're looking, that you have the same mission, and that you can show up for each other and be able to say, I'm really struggling, or help me here, or let's just talk about our successes, right? And having that community that will help foster the growth and be a collaborative in all spheres of this, successes, challenges, failures, and all of that. And so that piece, and I've been fortunate to find that community in a broad sense and not just in the Atlanta area, which has helped me look at things through different perspectives, because I think everybody's bubble should be bursted at some point, to recognize that there's global life out there outside of the area that you're currently located in. And so I think that is key, is finding that collaboration and finding those connections that can move you forward, and you can move them forward and celebrate each other, right? Celebrating successes is so huge, especially when you're working in the clinical field, that it may not feel like there's a lot of success all the time. But being able to celebrate the successes and not minimizing them is really important. Never stop learning and growing. And so the fact that you all are stepping outside and doing a lecture like this is fabulous. I think that piece, and again, I take that stance of, I don't want to be the smartest one in the room. I don't want to be the most experienced one in the room. Sometimes I actually want to just sit back and learn. I don't even want to share. Because I think that's where growth happens, as opposed to showing up and having to prove something, right? I think that piece can stunt our growth when we navigate through this in terms of proving something, where it's there's nothing to prove. We're all in this together, right? We're all interconnected, from Brazil to Atlanta to, right? We're all interconnected on some path in the same, some mission that we can learn from each other. So some of the science behind DBT and what has really resonated with me is that it is a treatment that treats individuals with severe mental disorders and out of control cognitive, emotional, and behavioral patterns. And so when I hear I hear this a lot, even in the US, of graduate school programs not really teaching DBT or valuing the modality as much. And I always wonder, is it that they don't believe in the treatment, or they don't want to treat those clients that the treatment is designed for? And so there's a huge stigma around borderline personality disorder, and there's a stigma around individuals with out of control emotions and interpersonal chaos and challenges. And that's what the treatment is for. And it's so powerful, the treatment, to be able to give those clients agency and life and their life back and a life worth living, that they're, in DBT, we look at functions, right? Like, what's the function of the behavior? All behavior is caused. We just have to figure out and help you figure out what the function of it is, because it's serving some purpose. It just may not be serving an effective, or maybe maintaining a maladaptive or a problematic behavior. But we want to look at the function of it, so that, and it treats, it was originally developed for individuals with borderline personality disorder, and it has since been adapted to a wide range of psychological issues and a wide range of populations, all the way down to, there's a model for little kids, there's an adolescent model. And so it has really evolved, but the principles have stayed the same. Even as it evolves, the principles stay intact, because that's where the research shows it, some of those core principles of the treatment. And but the biggest piece is that when the treatment is followed adherently to the model, it works, and it can provide those clients with a life worth living that they never thought they would have. And it's so, again, in the way I look at it with my clients, like, I feel privileged to be in the space with you, as opposed to you just thanking me for being willing to work with you, right? Like, that's really sad when I hear a client say, thank you for being willing to work with me. And it's like, well, I have the privilege that you will trust me to work with you. Like, we're working together in this. There isn't this hierarchical power differential where I'm here to just dictate and I'm here to just tell you what to do. Because again, they are the experts in their life. And so helping, giving some agency back in that. So the D in dialectical behavior therapy is really key, and it's a critical underpinning of DBT. So dialectics is a logic that identifies the contradictions in a person's position, right? And so I can be really frustrated with a client and proud of their progress at the same time. I don't have to pick a side. And when we can find the synthesis within those two opposites, it can help lessen the polarization, right? Like, the polarization is either I'm good or I'm bad, right? I have good moments and I have not so good moments. Both of those things are true. And so we want to help the clients find what is that in the middle, and how do we open space up for both of those things to be true. And a lot of clients coming into DBT, they have a very polarized way of thinking of, I'm either good or bad. I have to pick a side. You either love me or you hate me. You either want to work with me or you don't want to work with me, as opposed to that middle might be, I am having a hard time working with you, and I really I'm committed to working with you, right? Like, being able to hold space for both of those. So that's a really critical underpinning of DBT, because it allows space for that dichotomy in that contradiction on, the polarization that a lot of the clients come in with. And it balances that acceptance and change. So the one thing we are always striving for with clients is, how do we push you and challenge you and push you towards change, while at the same time accepting where you're at? And so personality plays into this in terms of, from the clinician. I tend to be more change oriented. There are other clinicians on my team that tend to be more accepting. and like a warmer approach. And so in that team, we have to balance that and see, like, are you pushing change too quickly? Does the client need you to sit in acceptance a little bit with them? And so we're constantly looking at how do we balance. The most effective thing we can do with a client is push them towards their life worth living. And in that process, we have to accept them along the way, right? We can't push them without accepting them, and we can't accept them without pushing them. And so it's holding space for both of those. And that helps the client feel less shame and recognize that, like, what they're going through is real, and that it's just not going to happen overnight, right? It's just not like change. If it was going to happen overnight, it would have happened. And so holding space for both of those to create that life worth living. What is it that makes your life worth living? And that's what we're striving for with our clients. So the modes of DBT, and I'm not going to get too much into this, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But comprehensive DBT includes 4 different modes. Weekly individual therapy, and this is it's structured, and that's where the adherence piece comes into it. That it's structured in the sense of we follow a diary card, and we address specific targets that are bringing the client into treatment, so that the sessions aren't mood dependent, right? Like if a client comes into treatment because they are self-harming, or they have interpersonal relationship, and there's chaos in their life, but there's a lot of traffic on their way to the session, and the session then becomes about the traffic. And so we're actually not in the treatment, right? Like, so that session then became mood dependent based off of whatever was happening in that moment. So we want to bring it back, and the individual sessions are targeted in a way that actually addresses what targets do you need to work on that will help you move in the direction towards your life worth living. Because there may be behaviors that you're doing that are actually taking you the opposite direction. And so being able to address those behaviors. And then we have a weekly skills group, which is 2 hours, and it's didactic. It's not process group. So DBT does not have a process group. They're just learning the skills. And then for adolescents, it's in a multifamily. And so the adolescent and the adolescent and their parents are attending group together. And so there's shared language, and we're looking at the family as a whole and providing the skills. And so the group part is where they learn the skills, and the individual part is where they apply them and figure out where they fit in their life. And then the in-between session phone coaching is a big piece of it, is that we're available to our clients 24/7. However, we have limits, right? Like one of the dialectics is we stretch our limits and we observe our limits. And so we want to be able to provide that in between session coaching, so that there's generalization of the skills, because majority of the clients are not coming into session dysregulated or with life happening at that moment. And so we want to be able to support them when life happens, so that there's more generalization in that moment where they can do something different. We're always looking for moments where there can be new learning or corrective learning happening. And so those are the moments when they can call for coaching and get support in what skills to use and how to not make the situation worse. Because again, week to week, like having a session once a week, that's not when life is showing up, right? Like life is happening in between sessions. And so we want to provide them support in between sessions. And then the clinician consultation team, this is where the therapists meet. It's essentially like therapy for the therapist. And this is an opportunity for the therapist to maintain their motivation for the treatment. And how can the team support them in keeping motivation and becoming a more effective therapist? It's not necessarily about the client, it's about the therapist. And I hear this a lot in programs, and the same thing with my program. It's like, that's like a highlight of the week, because it's an opportunity to get support, to share, and to just be open and vulnerable, and be able to say, like, I need help in this area. And how can I become a more effective therapist for this client or just in general. So those are the modes of DBT. So DBT has come to Brazil, and this is where, again, I'm not affiliated with behavioral tech, but they have done some work in Brazil, and I put the citation at the bottom, and there I pulled out pieces of this, but there are 2 blogs that have been written about this, of how the progression of DBT in Brazil has transformed, and that the training that is currently happening in Brazil. So you guys are on the front end of this, and so it's really exciting that DBT is going more international. And again, this is a huge goal and mission for, I think, the global DBT community, but especially the US-based experts in the field, of how do we disseminate this globally and not just like hold it tight to us in the US, right? Like, how can this be disseminated globally, and recognizing, what those key pieces are that need to be looked at in a cultural perspective. And there are, and at the end of this, there are 2 slides on there about all of the DBT manuals and books that have been translated in Portuguese. So there's a lot of, again, there's a shared mission to really disseminate this outside of the US. The adherence piece that I touched on earlier, when you're looking at bringing it to, and I said this to Anna when we first started, that I am not going to pretend to be culturally aware of Brazil. I want to be very sensitive to the fact that I'm not culturally aware of Brazil. And I think, when I look at learning the treatment, it's important that you learn the treatment and the underpinnings of the treatment as the model, and then adapting, right? And so we adopt before adapting. And so understanding the treatment as the research supports it, and then looking at are there adaptations that need to be made? And a lot of the cultural adaptations don't require the treatment to be adapted, right? It might require some of the strategies, right? There are some countries where an irreverence approach, or like that would come across very rude, and that would come across condescending. And so those strategies may need to be looked at from a cultural lens. But in terms of the treatment itself, the treatment itself doesn't necessarily need to be adapted. But I think once you learn the treatment, then you can identify that the strategies within the treatment that may need cultural adjustments or cultural consideration to them, based off of the way maybe familial systems work in your country, or the way that, right, like like in one of the interpersonal effectiveness, it's standing up for yourself and it's advocating for your needs. And in some cultures that may not be appropriate to advocate, to stand up to a parent and advocate and ask for your needs. And so it's those, so it's not necessarily that the underpinnings of the treatment are adapted. It's more of the strategies are adjusted to fit the cultural needs. And adherence is an ongoing target for all of us, as we never stop focusing on adherence. And there's research, and the citation is on here, of why adherence matters. So the research has shown that the higher the therapist's adherence is, the fewer suicide attempts in studies. And so actually having research around measuring adherence and measuring outcomes and suicide attempts, dropouts, psychiatric hospitalizations, the higher the adherence, the less dropout rate there is, the less psychiatric hospitalization. And it's a robust and important factor in reducing the risk of suicide. So the more adherent we are, the more likely we are to actually provide a treatment that is going to give the clients their life back and give them a life worth living. And when you're looking at supervision and consultation, I really encourage early on, if this is something that is permissible, is to record. That is one lesson that I learned early on. I was fortunate to have a supervisor that required recordings, but being able to record can really tell us what we don't know, right? Like, we can think that something goes one way and then look at the recording and be like, oh, I don't know, I didn't realize that that was happening in that session. So it can be a really good learning tool. And precision and clarity are of utmost importance. And so being able to be very precise in our body language. I might have missed a body language, missed something with the client, and being able to look back at a recording of the session is really valuable in our growth and being able to provide the clients with the treatment that they're actually seeking. So, in the cultural piece, the language and communication styles may be, one of the strategies that is looked at. Family dynamics, the stigma around mental health is a huge one of, if there's still, I've worked with clients that their culture doesn't ask for help, and it's looked down on asking for help. And so using phone coaching, we had to really pay attention to, there's a reason they're not using phone coaching, because culturally it's not appropriate, as opposed to assessing it from a commitment or assessing it from like, you don't want help. It's that in their culture, calling somebody and asking for help in the moment of need is not appropriate. And it's not culturally and so we had to work with that and figure out what are other ways. And again, it's more around cultural sensitivity versus throwing it out because of that, right? And so assessing that while keeping the culture in mind. And same thing with the family dynamics, right? There may be some strategies that encourage behavior within a family that's not appropriate, or that culturally would not be accepted. And so keeping that in mind, once you learn the underpinnings, then you can look at what are the cultural pieces that need to be adjusted. And when you're looking at training, and this is one thing that when behavioral tech brought their training to Brazil, that they're tailoring examples for that culture, right? And so that they're really looking at that cultural humility, and there's tailored examples, but they're also humble in a way of like, help me help you, like I want to learn from you, and not not feeling like that I have to figure out how to make this work when it just feels icky, right? Like, or it just doesn't feel right from the way that things are, the way things operate. And then obviously the language piece of it and the translation of some of the language. So those are some of the things to think about when you're looking at culturally competent training. And then, having buy-in when you're looking at treatment. I think this goes for all treatments. DBT there are studies out there on the cost effectiveness of DBT and how much money providing DBT saves in the system. Here in the US, we don't have centralized medicine. And so if y'all have centralized medicine in Brazil, that might be different, but a lot of our clients are either self-pay or using their private insurance. And so, considering that is, sometimes in the US, that's a barrier. Cost is a barrier to getting the treatment. But really doing your homework in the sense of like, why do we want to do this? Like, what is the goal, and why is this such a need? And then these are the books that have been translated into Portuguese, the manuals and some of the text. And I think I hit I'm a few minutes over, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I feel like I rushed through that, but I want to make sure that there's some time for questions.
Hey Kim, great presentation. One book that we have here that you don't put in there is the Charles Swinson one.
Oh, Charlie Swenson's book.
Yes, about the principle. Is honestly the best book that I'm reading about DBT that talks about principles, right? So it's really good, and it's about a life worth living.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really good. I have two questions
Good.
that I prepared, and then we're gonna read the questions from the audience. Okay. The first question is about what you already said. Therapy is expensive, and DBT is more expensive therapy. So here in Brazil, a therapy is like 100 reais, 150 basically, and a DBT session the cost is basically like 300. So it's like double, 300, 400. And it's really difficult, especially with people with uh, really severe health disorders. So there are people who generally don't work or can work and have to pay more expensive procedures. So it's more like a reflective, which is really different from here in Brazil, is the system health system, which here we have a public health system, which is similar to Canada, kind of worse but similar. And I think that that's the biggest problem, because the feedback that we have from therapists who are working with DBT is like it's great, but it's expensive. That's like the biggest problem. Is the problem especially with the skills training. So the most of the therapists is do the training individually, which Lahan talks about in the book, how he really likes the training using groups now. So that's like the first question.
Is it okay to do the training individually? Is that
Oh, there's the results. So it's like the only way, basically.
yeah? And here in the U.S., we are working legislatively with to look at reimbursement for DBT. It's a very slow process, but there's not a lot. So it's different in the sense that while DBT is more expensive because of the group for the client, maybe because of the group aspect, but it's not super common that therapists are charging extra to do a DBT session. Mm. And so if I charge, $200, $300, I don't charge different for a DBT session. Mm-hmm. And so that sounds like it's different. Like you're charging actually different to provide DBT.
Mm-hmm. I think it's like there's ways around. So intervals between individual sessions and skill training, so the price keeps the same.
Oh, okay.
So like there'll be more sessions, so the price will go up.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But generally the price is really, really, I don't know how to say this, but it's not really great, especially with the public that we're treating, especially. Yeah. And we have a really big problem here in Brazil, that the public health system, psychologically, mental, basically, is really into psychoanalysis, which is not Yes, with
And so I
DBT.
think it's, in that it's looking at how do you find a way to present the data that shows the cost effectiveness of DBT and why it actually would save the public health system money, because the clients aren't going into psychiatric hospitals, which is way more expensive than outpatient DBT. And so it's finding a way to lobby to those stakeholders where maybe there can be an understanding of why this treatment actually would save them money, as opposed to it being just more expensive at the face value. But there's cost effectiveness research that shows that DBT actually saves money. And I think if there is a way to lobby to the public health system and recognizing that that's a big undertaking and it's such a need globally to understand the importance of the treatment for these clients that need it.
Yes. That's a political problem, basically.
Yeah. You're not alone in that.
So do you want to make questions, Anna, Rebecca, or we should do the audience first?
A question on the screen. Do you want me to answer that
There's a question on
question?
the screen from
Yeah.
Atílio de Moura.
Yeah.
Good evening, Dr. Vay. Could you explain more about the DBT LBC certification program, such as requirements to join, activities developed, and current number of licensed therapists on the program?
So the DBT LBC clinician certification is that there's the piece that is important to note is that it's our exam. So there's an exam application. You have to be fully licensed, able to practice independently, and that then there is a application, an exam, and then a submission of videos. And right now, all of that is in English, and that we have clinicians. We have about 600 certified clinicians worldwide,
Legal.
in US and 15 countries. The piece that there's certain pieces that are required in terms of governing bodies and licensure that some countries don't have, but in terms of being able, you have to be able to practice independently, and then provide, that's the rigor of it, is the exam, which is Marcia's text, the cognitive behavioral therapy for borderline personality disorder, is based off of that, and then submission of recordings that get coded for adherence.
All right. The next question is from Sofia Carneiro. She said, "Thank you for the amazing lecture. In your opinion, how effective is DBT as an intervention for athletes within the field of sport psychology?"
I don't have personal experience, and I can imagine that it would be really effective based off of identifying, what are the components that may not, if there's something getting in the way of a life worth living or a goal within the field of sports psychology and within that whatever field is that they're in, and being able to target those so that there's an awareness behind it and skills that can, and those opportunities that there can be new and corrective learning that can reshape the way that maybe they're looking at failure, right? In DBT, we remove judgment. So we look at failure is not negative. Failure just means we didn't reach a goal. And so if we didn't reach a goal, then we have to look at what got in the way of reaching that goal. And so it can help to really parse out some of the automatic behaviors that we have that we may not even be aware of, and insert new ways of regulating, right? Like, because maybe there's dysregulation when they fail or they don't reach a specific goal, and being able to, you know, sort of create new pathways in their brain to handle those situations differently. So I think it could be really effective. And not everybody needs or meets the criteria that needs all components of DBT, right? And so I think there's you know, being able to recognize that piece too.
I have another question if nobody submitted. So one thing that I find really hard is to explain dialectic. I do a group study about skill training here in the university, and this is one of the things that I found really hard to explain. So, what is dialectic and how to use it in clinic, and how do you explain what is dialectic to clients who probably never heard that word, never in their life?
Yeah, that's a great question, because dialectics are so important. And if you think about, I know when I think about life here in the US, we don't have a lot of dialectical modeling, right? Like, there's opinions that are very polarized. And so when I teach dialectics to clients, that is, you know, there are two opposing forces, there are two opposing views that are showing up at the same time. And how do we find that synthesis in the middle? And so, like, you know, if you think about a pendulum, you know what a pendulum is? A pendulum will always swing back to the middle. The only way it won't is if we hold it on one side or the other. So if we get stuck on one side or the other, then we get polarized and emotions really go up. And so another, you know, in DBT, we use a lot of metaphors and we use a lot of examples. And so finding even a personal example to say, like, you know, maybe I didn't want to show up to this class and I really want to learn the information. Both of those things can be true at the same time. I don't have to figure out, how do I want to be here? I can not want to be here and show up and do the work, right? And so finding examples that are relevant to the audience that you're talking to. And, you know, and a lot of times I'll ask the client, do you believe that you can be upset with your friend and still be best friends with them? And they're absolutely not. Like, you have to pick. You're either best friends or not. Like, you can't have both. And so that opens up conversation then. It's like, we can be upset and friends. We just have to hold space for both and figure out what we need in the middle. And so it's finding a way that can be an example that can resonate with the audience that you're talking to, so that it can open up discussion and get them to see, oh, I do get stuck on, the only way I can do this work is if I absolutely want to be there. And even in skills groups, sometimes we'll talk about, and when we talk about dialectics, like, how many people don't want to be here? And there's usually a couple. And how many people want to do better and learn the skills? And those same people raise their hand, right? And so both things are true at the same time, but in order to not keep the pendulum over there, we have to let go of both sides and hold space for both of them. Does that answer your question? Does that answer it?
Yes, definitely.
And it's really looking at personal examples, and examples that the audience that you have, or the client sitting across from you, can resonate with, that are non-emotional, right? Like, I didn't want to be in class, you know, I didn't want to come to this group, and I want to learn the skills.
Yes. Basically using examples, right?
Yeah, yes. Using examples, using metaphors, getting them to really see it from the way that they may, you know, that may resonate with them.
Dr. Kimberly, thank you for it was a great talk, And I also have a question and send it in the chat. The DBT has revolutionized the world of therapy by uniting acceptance and change. And for you, what innovations or future developments do you see for DBT in the coming years?
It's a great question. It's a big question. I think one of the innovations and the direction is really disseminating it outside of the US, outside of the population maybe that it was even developed for, and looking at it through a lens of from the marginalized communities, from cultural perspectives, really disseminating it globally into different countries, and being able to be innovative again in that the cultural awareness around some of the strategies and some of those pieces, not necessarily the underpinnings of the treatment, but those strategies. And so a big piece is that dissemination, right? Like, because if we can disseminate it globally, then the individual countries can foster it and grow it, right? Like, and so it's just a matter of planting the seed and getting the groundwork for it, and so that it can grow globally, and that it can become more of it, because it is a life-changing treatment for clients, and those clients don't just live in the US, right? Those clients live globally. We all, and again, we're all interconnected, and so I think that is a piece of the innovation, is really the dissemination of the treatment on a global scale.
Amazing. Thank you.
Dr. Kimberly, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes.
How's research? The clinic does research on DBT, or it's how does that work?
So there are different individuals that do research that are, so there, a lot of the research came out of UW, out of Marcia's lab. And there, a lot of the clinicians and the experts that were a part of those research initiatives are continuing to do research. And I think that is also a part of future developments, is researching with marginalized communities, researching globally, researching with a cultural perspective, which is not, is not all what the original research was done on. And so there's still a collective group of researchers that are actively working to continue to do research around effectiveness, around the ways that it is used with other populations. And again, a big piece of it is that research on LGBTQ, the BIPOC community, all the marginalized communities, that research is a big piece of that innovation and future development that wasn't necessarily the part of the original research.
So the clinic itself do not do research. Like, members of the clinic are a part of some laboratory. Is that
you mean Marcia's clinic?
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure if that is still doing research within that clinic. There's research being done like outside of that and globally, that I'm not 100% sure if the research is actually still being done within that clinic, but that a lot of the individuals that were early in the research are still doing research.
Thank you a lot, Kimberly. And I would like to ask you a final question, like What would you do if you were in college again, studying psychology? What would you do differently, and what would you do differently, and what did you do that you? I'm English. What did you do differently, and what you liked about your path?
I think if I was back in college, which I would like love to be, I would I don't actually know. When I went, because I did my when I did my doctorate, I did a first dissertation in the juvenile justice system. And I think I don't think I appreciated the what I had in front of me. I think I would slow down and like hone in and appreciate it more, as opposed to it just being I want to learn this and I want to get through this. And I would just like appreciate it and recognize that this is going to come to an end, right? Like I'm not going to be a student. And so I'm appreciating it more. And one thing that I did that I think is very beneficial is I picked an internship site that was not something that I knew or that I was comfortable with. I picked an internship site that it was in a residential facility that worked with both sex offenders and highly dysregulated youth. And I didn't know who I was working with. I didn't have a choice on who I was working with. So it gave me the opportunity to identify from an experience of like, what is the population that fits me best, as opposed to it just, I don't think I want to work with that population, but it sort of pushed me outside of my comfort zone. So easy to just pick something or stick with something because that's what we know. And so really going out of your comfort zone. But I think if there was one thing I would do differently is I would slow down the process and appreciate that everything there is to learn and not just do it, to like get on the other side.
I like that. That was personal to me. Thank you for that. And that led me to one final question. If you were to tell us about only one book outside DBT, what's your favorite book outside psychology and DBT?
In terms of like a self-help book?
It can be any book. Physics, I don't know.
So
literature.
The best book that I've read recently is by Mel Robbins and the Let Them Theory.
What was the name?
It's called the Let Them Theory.
The Let Them.
And that is a fabulous book. The non-psychology book is Midnight Library. I love that book. It's called Midnight Library.
Midnight Library. Mm-hmm.
It's more of a fiction book, but it's about a little bit about depression, and it's about like time warping and time. So that was a really a cool book. My favorite is memoirs. So if you have any memoirs of anybody, feel free to send them to me. I don't read Portuguese. I could learn maybe, or I could, chat GPT it, but memoir, like I'm like stuck on memoirs. So I really enjoy reading stories of others that are like, I just find it very admirable for people who write memoirs and their ability to be vulnerable and share their story on such a large platform. And so that has been my go-to recently.
I'll be aware when you launched yours.
Okay.
Guys,
I checked, and we don't have the Latin theory in Portuguese, so unfortunately. So probably just in English.
Check out Midnight Library.
Guys, the lista de presença tá no chat, so please click on it so you get the certification from this lecture here. Dr. Kimberly, let me put your presentation for the contact information.
And my email is on the first slide. And if there's anything that has come out of this that you wanted expanded on or that you wanted to do more, I'm happy to, I'd be honored to return and provide more insight however I can.
So thank you guys. Thank you for watching. We are going to subtitle it and then you can watch again with Portuguese subtitles. Thank you for your time. We truly appreciate. And thank you again, Dr. Kimberly, for
accepting our
invitation. It was great. You're such a nice person. I will chamar de novo para falar de novo. How can I say that? I will call you again.
Call you again, yes.
Partnership. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Last words?
Just be open to learning and humble and be willing to not be the smartest one in the room.
Love it. Be willing to not be the smartest person in the room. Love that.
Allow your bubble to burst.
Get out of your bubble, you say?
Allow your bubble to burst. Yes, there is a world outside of your bubble.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your bubble with us today and us with you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberly. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, you were the smartest one today, but
I am not. No, because I don't understand. I don't know Brazilian culture. So there are a lot of areas that I was not the smartest one in, and so we can revisit those areas that I'm not the smartest one in.
Very good. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.